So I saw this post on the Final Fantasy XIV discussion subreddit talking about how Party Finder is in a really bad state in regards to the behaviors experienced in Chaotic Alliance raid. And I wanted to talk about it and go over some of the interesting comments I saw since it did resonate a lot with thoughts that I've had myself. The post is basically about how Party Finder is too willing to put up with bad play, which makes Chaotic Alliance raid a really rough fight to farm. It mentions how people are too scared to say anything because they're worried about getting banned. And then it suggests that you can say things like DPS isn't good enough, or people don't know mechanics and should practice. Then it talks about how the priority ends up being people's feelings over the time wasted of the party, which sucks when you play with limited time. They say, I just want to be able to accomplish something in an afternoon after work, even if there are a few mistakes. For the most part, I pretty much agree with a lot of what this user is saying. I don't know about you, but I don't like waiting in a party for an entire lockout when I know that we're wiping way before the actual prog point. To me, that's just a big waste of time. But the problem that me and probably many other people encounter is that it's hard to fill parties sometimes, especially in a fight like this where you need 24 players. So you're willing to stay and hope that it works out instead of going back in the party finder when you don't have much time to play anyway. And time is the big thing here. With this many players, when you join a party that you're not really ready for, you're wasting the time of 23 other players, and I do think that that's really inconsiderate. And while I do generally love how Final Fantasy XIV's culture is around dealing with other players, it does make situations like this awkward. Because it's true that a lot of people would rather lie about where they're supposed to be at in the prog points, and most people are too scared to say anything because they are worried about getting banned. I don't think that saying generalized statements in Alliance chat like people need to practice mechanics more or DPS is bad really does anything. The fact of the matter is, we can't know why DPS is bad. And the moment you try to find out if you're, say, using a third-party tool, you're not supposed to technically know that. So what choice do you have because you can't say anything? At that point, if people aren't pulling their weight, you don't really have much of an option besides going back to Party Finder. And then you know how Final Fantasy XIV players are. The moment you leave the instance, people start dropping like flies, because they're also aware of how we're having problems and not likely to clear with the current party, but because they have no control over it, they'd rather cut their losses and try elsewhere. Other games either are designed differently or just have systems to make it obvious where the problems are. And for better or for worse, Final Fantasy is designed in a way where we don't have these options. Which I do ultimately think is a good thing because it causes a lot of toxicity when you do have stuff like this. But the downside is that, yeah, you will have a lot more wasted time because you can't effectively filter out players who aren't pulling their weight. And I think it's really relatable for a lot of people when they talk about how they just want to accomplish something in an afternoon. This perspective is especially important in my opinion. Some people might have a lot of free time to play this game and they put in, 6-8 hours a day raiding or whatever, and that's fine. But a person like that's likely to have a much different attitude from someone who only has maybe 2 hours a night for a couple of days during the week. When you have a lot less time to play, that time's a lot more precious, and you probably don't want to waste that wiping to towers in a farm party. That's what makes Chaotic Alliance raids unapproachable for a lot of people in my opinion. At least in Savage, you only need 7 other people to fill the party. But yeah, I really feel for this person and I'm not sure if there's really a solution here. But I wanted to start digging into some of the comments because people bring up some interesting points as well. Like this one here that says, people put up with it because anytime one person drops, be it by their own will or getting kicked, 1/4 of the group leaves. Nobody has patience to wait for the group to refill even if it's only one person. And yeah, I can relate to that. Sometimes when I'm in Savage, if we have to re-instance because someone has to go, sometimes I'm really quick to say, hey, I'm staying, I'm willing to stay and keep going, so that other people are inspired to not just leave instantly. Especially when we mostly have a good party and the person leaving is the one who kept wiping or something. But what I like is one of the replies to this. It talks about how it would be cool if we could refill a party from within the instance. Many other games have systems like this, and I feel like this would be great for Final Fantasy XIV. Since I've lost so much time to people leaving one by one as soon as the first person goes. So hopefully this would give people a reason to stay around a little bit longer. Another interesting comment in this thread came from a user where it sounds like they actually organize runs in the Chaotic Alliance raid Discord that everyone uses. It talks about their struggles of dealing with people who lie about their progression, such as people who have never entered the raid joining an enraged party, and how despite being in a position of mentorship and training others, they really had to hold back their own raids because of how frustrating that kind of situation can be. Because yeah, quite frankly, it's really disrespectful if you do this. And it's just a massive waste of time. This is why it's kind of understandable that people are using Tome Zone to check logs and progress in Ultimate these days. Because the prog lying issue feels really rampant right now. There's just not much of a way to enforce accountability on a lot of players in this game. Honestly, I wish that tools like this were just built into the game. Imagine being able to set filters like, oh, only players who've been to Phase 4 are allowed to join. This would get rid of a lot of the prog lying issue in my opinion. And would also mean that more players practice the stuff that they actually need to practice. So it's basically a win-win for everyone, even the people who want to rush when they shouldn't be. Low-key though, if I'm being blunt, instead of just a prog point filter, I'd rather it be something like seen Phase 4 5 times or 10 times or something like that. because a lot of people get carried through mechanics that they don't actually understand. But anyway, this last comment takes a different approach. It says, for your own mental well-being, stay away from Party Finder. You just asked for consistent strats, average DPS, and constructive criticism. This is not a Final Fantasy XIV issue, this is just how pugs work. And for those who don't know, pug refers to pickup games, so Party Finder playing with randoms. That's basically what that term means. Someone replies below, it's a Final Fantasy XIV issue because one bad player can wipe 23 other players. In other MMOs with large raid content, for example WoW, if one player screws up, they die. Rarely if ever does it cause the entire group to wipe. That's the difference. It's a Final Fantasy XIV problem because Final Fantasy XIV is not pug friendly in the slightest. And these are both some great points, honestly. I know many people that refuse to do Party Finder for any content. This group of people either chooses to only play in statics or they just don't raid at all because it's not worth the time investment. Honestly, I even have nights where I feel like this, and I choose not to raid because enough of my time is felt wasted with people lying about where they are in the fight. And sometimes you have nights where people know the mechanics, but the damage is so bad that you never clear and hidden rage constantly for hours and hours. And you can't really do much about that. And honestly, I think a lot of us need to take a step back and realize that a lot of people would not want to play a game like this where they spend this much time on basically not getting anywhere. It takes a special degree of tolerance to put up with this kind of content, especially compared to games like, I don't know, Elden Ring, where yeah, you might spend a lot of time wiping to the boss, but it's because of your own mistakes, which you can correct. In a game like Final Fantasy XIV, you can spend hours and hours wiping to a boss because someone else keeps messing up, and then the next person, and the next person, and the next person. So yeah, it makes sense that this experience is not enjoyable to a lot of people, and that Party Finder really isn't meant for them, or even raiding as a whole. However, that second comment that talks about how Final Fantasy XIV's design lends itself to experiences like this is pretty accurate in my opinion. This is why the last tier of Endwalker got a lot of criticisms, because of the amount of body checks that you experienced. Body checks drastically increase the time it takes to clear a fight. And when your fight feels like it has nothing but body checks, looking at you, P10S, it exponentially increases the impact this has. But I think aside from these issues, it's also about the culture of the game. Other games have cultures that are much less afraid of telling you when you messed up. And like I said earlier, this is also easier when it's obvious who's messing up. In a fight like the Chaotic Alliance raid, if someone messes up a tower all the way on the other side of the arena, you have no idea who did it. Personally, while I don't see accountability being more present in the culture, at least for content like this, I think that the way Square can tackle this is fight design. For example, during towers, maybe they're just a bit more scalable. It's already not a strict body check then that you can still have someone mess up a tower and survive, but it seems like for most groups, 2 to 3 towers being missed is a wipe. I think designing fights in a way where maybe 4 or 5 towers could be missed, and instead of having so many shared towers, you have more individual towers, would help to make the mechanic a lot more palatable. Even if you think that the mechanic isn't hard, because I don't think it's hard personally, the developers do have to design around the state of Party Finder and not just one region's state of Party Finder, because people like to point out about how Japan doesn't struggle nearly as much as we do with this fight. And while I don't want Square to only develop for the lowest skill level possible, I think that there are other ways that we can reward personal performance. And having less lethal body checks also means that you can do more of them. But that's a whole other conversation. Anyway, if you like this video, you should check out this one next, and I'll see you later.